Penn State's schedule this year, very, very interesting because we look at Penn State and they will take on Appalachian State to begin the year. That'll be this weekend up at Happy Valley, and then they'll take on the Pitt Panthers on the road at Heinz Field, a second time in 3 years that they'll be there, and then one more time back at Beaver Stadium the following year. But you look in the middle of that schedule, Saturday, September 29th, a home game against Ohio State, a bye week, which I think might help, and then at home against Michigan State, at Michigan on November the 3rd, hosting Wisconsin the very next weekend. So, some very, very difficult games there. A lot to get to in this schedule, and to do so, we're going to bring on Brian Tripp. Brian Tripp is with BTN, and we're excited to have him on. He's been a great resource for us in the past and has been very, very generous with his time. We appreciate him coming on. And Brian, welcome back to another Nittany Lion Sports Report. We're excited to talk some football once again.
Thanks a lot, Bob. Really appreciate you having me on. If you hear some noise in the background, it's 85 and sunny in Happy Valley. Sun is setting just right now over the mountain, so checking out a little soccer game this evening.
Oh, wonderful. Over there at Jeffrey Field, huh?
Yeah, pitch looks pretty good.
That's good. Well, we'll talk about the other pitch, and that's the pitch just across the way at Beaver Stadium, which will host the first game of the regular season against Appalachian State. I guess we got to get this question out of the way. World beaters back in the mid-2000s beat Michigan. Of course, many, many permutations to that program since then, moved up from FCS to the FBS. Really, they've had a decent showing since their time in the FBS, the only non-conference opponent with receiving votes in the top 25 for Penn State. What do you see, or what do you know about this Appalachian State team that folks that are kind of dusting off the tailgate equipment and heading up to State College might expect this weekend?
Well, if you didn't know much about them prior to James Franklin press conference today, you probably know a lot about them now. I think he spent about 8 minutes talking about the opponent just to make sure his team, and I think the media doesn't overlook them, is a team that's 30-9 over the last 3 seasons, has won 3 straight bowl games. And you look across the board, they're replacing a 4-year starter at quarterback, but they have a lot of playmakers on offense, a 2-time all-conference running back. They have some experience back along the offensive line. They do have speed on the outside, which is the great equalizer, which James Franklin talked about today. And then defensively, they have some all-conference returnees as well. So I think this is a really good first game for Penn State, where, look, Penn State has a lot more talent, has a lot more experience, and should win the football game. But it's a team that at least is going to challenge Penn State in some ways than maybe an opponent that really struggled in the MAC last year per se. This is a team that's had success in its conference, success in a bowl game. And I think it's a really good first game for Penn State. Not going to be a pushover, but a game ultimately you think Penn State should win.
And a game in which Penn State will have the opportunity and really the necessity to work in some guys that either weren't on the roster, weren't in a starting role last year. And I'll take you specifically to the defensive line because clearly we've seen a lot of changes, 2 retirements due to injury. I think we thought for a while the defensive end position might be the one with the most depth. Now there's questions about Shane Simmons as well, with Torrance Brown retiring and Ryan Buchholz retiring. What do you see at the front 4 position this year, and how will Penn State adjust to some of the departures that I mentioned?
Yeah, I think a defensive line right now that's a little bit in flux, but has a lot of talent that is in the stable. Look, I don't think it's any surprise to the coaching staff that Ryan Buchholz or Torrance Brown ended up retiring. It sounds like around the program they knew that was going to happen for a long time. But you're already replacing your starters at defensive tackle from a year ago, Cothran and Cothran. So you knew it was going to be a new look, but they've recruited really well at that position. PJ Mustipher, I can't wait to see on the field. And we'll finally get a look at Shelton. We'll get a look at Hansard. We'll get a look at Windsor in some more extended action. And I think the defensive end position still, even without Torrance Brown and Ryan Buchholz, could be a strength of the team. Sharif Miller has the potential to be one of the best defensive linemen. They should ban Vuvuzelas from soccer, but Sharif Miller has the potential to be one of the best defensive linemen in the entire Big Ten. I think Yetur Gross-Matos proved last year that not only is he came in as a freshman and performed well last year and counted on some big games, but not only does he have a bright future here at Penn State, but probably has a professional future in front of him. And then when you get to the likes of Shane Simmons as a pass rusher, who wasn't on the depth chart this week, it sounds like he's battling some injury. Shaka Toney, and then some of the incoming guys, I think I know Joseph is on there. Coaching staff likes him in limited action, that they've seen him in the past. I think it's a chance now for guys to really prove. And if there's one position where, going into the year, you may have questions, but if a track record for Sean Spencer is proven anything, you probably don't need to have questions. It's that defensive line group at Penn State, especially the defensive ends.
Hey, Brian, this is Tyler Gehlhaus. Quick question, sticking on the defensive side of the ball. I'm going to move back to linebackers. Obviously, Manny Bowen was reinstated in early August, and we learned yesterday that he is no longer with the program. How does this affect the linebacking corp going into the season and actually throughout the whole season, specifically with Jan Johnson starting in the middle?
Yeah, I think you'll see a lot of different linebackers play for Penn State. I'm not sure just necessarily because they were listed the starters in week 1. That's what the starters will be in week 4 or week 5. But I think it's the guys right now that give them the best chance to win in week 1. Jan Johnson is an experienced middle linebacker. He runs okay, but he knows where to be. His instincts are pretty good. He's a really good athlete, obviously. He wrestled for Penn State for a little bit. So they're counting on him because he knows where to go. He knows what to do. And then Koa Farmer proved last year that I think he's continuing his transition to linebacker. Now he's comfortable at that position. And Cam Brown's a guy that could have a breakout year. For Cam, it hasn't been a question about his physical attributes. It's been more for Cam about, does he understand the defense? He can certainly run in coverage. Will he be in the right spot? So I think the linebacker position, I'm not sure they ever really were counting on Manny Bowen. I think it would have been a nice addition, a nice surprise if they had him. But talking at media day, it just sounded like Manny had to earn the trust back of his teammates and his coaches, and ultimately the program parting ways with Manny. And Manny, I guess today, one of the players said in a conference call that he was focusing on his academics now. I'm not sure they really were planning on having him in the fold anyway. So I'm not sure that they view that, again, as a huge loss. And we didn't even talk about Ellis Brooks, who's a really talented young player, Jesse Luketa, who I think is going to play by the time the year's out, and then Micah Parsons, who's going to play. It's just, can he be consistent enough to be a starter? And I think the first couple of weeks could prove very valuable to Micah, where he can gain that on-field experience and perhaps become a guy Penn State can count on in 3 downs and not just in certain packages.
Well, there's a guy that I think a lot of folks at Penn State are looking forward to seeing. And on the offensive side of the ball, that's a young guy named Justin Shorter. And I also think that between him and Jahan Dotson, you might have 2 guys that can play. And I don't know if that time, is week 1 per se, most likely not for Shorter, as we found out. But whether that time to play will exceed the 4-game threshold before you need to burn a red shirt, and whether those guys will be 3rd and 4th options from a wide receiver perspective this year.
Yeah, that certainly does throw a little bit of a wrinkle into that 4-game thing. And James Franklin, I asked him about that today specifically. He said, well, the guys who are green lighted are going to be green lighted very much the same as before, and everything same as before. The guys who are kind of given that yellow designation, they'll be the guys that maybe they keep an eye on with that 4-game threshold. And then the guys who are truly red lighted or red shirted, they're still going to be red shirted. That it doesn't really change a whole lot for them. The only thing about the wide receiver position and Justin Shorter, I think it's kind of been explained here that he's nicked up. There's so much depth and talent there already without, look, if a freshman's that good and earns playing time, they're going to find a way on the field. But between Jawan Johnson, DeAndre Tompkins, Brandon Polk, KJ Hamler, and Matt Hippenhammer, okay, there you already have 5 guys. Right. And then I know people are talking highly about Cam Sullivan-Brown. That being said, there's a reason Justin Shorter was one of the top recruits in the country, and if he gets healthy and they feel comfortable about putting him in that offense, or even Jahan Dotson, who's had a terrific fall for Penn State. Dotson, I actually saw play a high school game last year. He just needs to get bigger. He's smooth. He can really run once he gets the football. They're going to find a way to get him the ball, but he's a guy that I think 2-3 years from now, you look at, he could be a star at this level. He just needs to get a little bigger yet. But if he's good enough, they'll find a way to get him some touches.
It seems like this is one of the first years in a while, we haven't had a lot of question marks on the offensive line, which is a great thing. However, there is a lot of question marks replacing Gesicki at tight end, and in the depth chart released today by James Franklin, it has Holland or Dalton, and then backed up by Bowers and the true freshman Freiermuth. How do you see that shaking out throughout the season?
Well, I think it speaks volumes about Freiermuth that James Franklin said he's going to be one of the guys that's green-lighted from the get-go. So that means they think pretty highly of him. Overall, the tight end position, I don't know that you can replace the pass-catching ability and touchdowns and whatever Gesicki brought to you as a playmaker. I don't know you can replace that. But I think and look, this is not a knock on Mike Gesicki. I think he's going to be a terrific NFL player, but you can't get much worse blocking at that position. So I think if Jonathan Holland or Danny Dalton or Nick Bowers, whoever it may be, can prove to be a very competent blocker, they'll rotate that position. So if there's a pass catching situation, maybe that dictates who plays. And I think by getting a better blocker in at tight end, which I think they'll have this year, will help them balance out the offense a little bit more. I think it's going to be a very balanced offense, kind of like you saw in the Fiesta Bowl, where touches will go to whoever. Trace McSorley's a senior quarterback who's going to spread the ball around. And I think it's going to give the offense, it's going to have a different dynamic, a different feel to it, but I think it's going to be as explosive as ever.
Brian Tripp on with us here from Big Ten Network, as well as the Between the Lions podcast. He's also the voice of the Penn State hockey team, the Penn State baseball team. Excited to have him on, and not calling the game, but over at Jeffrey Field tonight, giving us a little report on soccer as well. We appreciate you certainly taking the time here this evening, and we want to get you out here on a couple items. We want to get your opinion on, I guess, whatever bold prediction you'd like to make, whether that's Trace McSorley winning the Heisman, whether that's the college football playoff for Penn State, some of both, or none of any of that. What do you think can happen, will happen on the Penn State side that either folks are really hopeful about or people might not see coming?
Oh man, that's a tough question.
Very broad. I apologize. Yes,
it is. Is it bold to say that Miles Sanders will have more rushing yards than Saquon did last year? Is that a bold prediction?
I like it.
It is bold, and I like it too. And I do agree with Brian on that.
Yeah, I think that's plenty bold.
Yeah, I just think that it goes back to them and the diversity that the offense has. I think Miles is going to have some room to run, and they're going to give him the ability to do that and showcase his talents. That's not that Miles Sanders. Look, I'm not saying Miles Sanders is better than Saquon Barkley. Saquon's a once-in-a-generation talent, but just the way the carries are going to be distributed, and teams won't be so focused on one single guy. You're not going to have 9-10 guys in a box this year. I think it's going to give Miles at least the freedom where he can maybe gain 5 or 6 yards at a time. Saquon, it felt like sometimes last year, just because of the blocking scheme in front of him, and defense is keying on him so much. Last year, Saquon was a little bit more boom and bust than I think Penn State would have liked.
Fair enough. And then if you could, let our folks know, because you do such good work around the program with your podcast, with BTN, and all the different mediums through which you transmit your message, what you're going to be up to this fall and how people can follow you.
Yeah, so the first couple of weeks of the season, I'll be doing post-game interviews with Coach Franklin after the game on gopsusports.com and on Tuesdays. So today we did kind of a game preview with Coach. We walked around the Lash Field and talked to Will Fries, who's listed as an or at tackle, and Amani Oruwariye, the cornerback. So those video previews will be coming up during the week. And then when I'm needed, we're doing pregame and postgame reports for Big Ten Network. And as always, I'll maybe have a nugget or two on my Twitter account as well. So I guess you read a long resume. If it's a Penn State sporting event, I'll probably be there in some capacity, for better or worse.
That's great, man. Well, we appreciate you taking some time, literally out of your time at the soccer match, to give us some insight. We appreciate it as always, and hopefully we'll catch you midway through the season here, maybe an undefeated record or something going into Michigan State on the 13th.
I would not be stunned. Would not be stunned, and don't worry about distracting me from a soccer game. I enjoy coming to watch Penn State, and it looks like Coach Cook's going to do a great job with the program. But sometimes soccer I find less than enthralling after watching the puck fly around the ice all winter.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, we will talk to you soon, my friend.